The email sat in his inbox for 3 days before he finally opened it. 20 years. Had it really been that long since high school? The invitation to the class reunion made Anthony's stomach tighten with a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. The memories came rushing back, the whispers in the hallway, the accidental shoulder bumps at his locker, the lunches spent alone. Anthony leaned back in his leather office chair, the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office showcasing the city skyline he now partially owned. His company, Vision Tech, had revolutionized affordable eye care technology across the globe. What had started as a simple idea in his college dorm room had grown into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise with him at the helm. The financial magazines called him one of the most influential entrepreneurs of his generation, but back in high school, he was just the skinny kid with 2 short pants and big dreams. He clicked on the email again. Westridge High School, class of 2005. The reunion committee had tracked him down through his old email, which he kept active mostly for online subscriptions and the occasional message from distant relatives. They probably had no idea who he had become. His success had been featured in business publications, but he had always been private about his personal life, avoiding social media and declining most interview requests that weren't strictly business-related. "You should go," said a voice from the doorway. Anthony looked up to see his assistant, Ray, holding a stack of documents that needed signatures. "Go where?" Anthony asked, though he knew exactly what Ray meant. They had worked together for over a decade, and Ray had become more like family than an employee. "To the reunion. I saw the email notification pop up on your calendar sync." Ray placed the documents on the corner of Anthony's desk. "You've been staring at your screen for 15 minutes without moving." Anthony sighed. "Why would I want to go back there? Those weren't exactly the best years of my life." Ray leaned against the doorframe. "Maybe that's exactly why you should go. Close that chapter properly." The words hung in the air as Anthony scrolled through the email again. The reunion would be held at the Grand Hotel downtown. Ironically, a property his investment group had acquired last year. The thought made him smile slightly. "What if I went and nobody remembered me?" Anthony asked. Ray laughed. "Is that really what you're worried about? Or are you more concerned that they will remember you, and you'll feel like that insecure kid again?" The question hit close to home. Despite all his success, the money, the respect, the impact his work had made, part of him still carried the weight of those painful teenage years. The bullying had shaped him in ways he was still discovering. It had fueled his drive, his determination to prove everyone wrong, but it had also left scars that his wealth couldn't erase. That evening, Anthony sat on the balcony of his penthouse apartment, nursing a glass of whiskey as the sun set over the city. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother. "Got your message. Of course I think you should go to the reunion. Show those jerks what they missed out on by not being friends with the coolest kid in school." Anthony smiled. His older brother had always been his defender, even when they were kids. He'd been away at college during most of Anthony's high school years, but he'd heard enough stories to understand what his little brother had gone through. Anthony thought about Jordan and his crew, the popular guys who had made high school a daily exercise in humiliation. Jordan had been the ringleader, the star quarterback with the perfect hair and the cruel laugh. His sidekicks, Pete and Trent, were equally merciless. They had targeted Anthony relentlessly, mocking his second-hand clothes, his interest in computers, and later, when puberty hit everyone but him, his small stature. There had been the time they dumped his backpack in a toilet, ruining his textbooks and the computer parts he'd saved months to buy. The time they'd started a rumor that he had been caught peeping in the girls' locker room, leading to weeks of disgusted glances from classmates. The jokes about his family not being able to afford proper clothes or school lunch. And then there was prom night. Anthony had finally worked up the courage to ask Lily Chen, a quiet girl from his AP physics class. She had seemed genuinely pleased when she said yes. He had spent his entire savings from his weekend job at the electronics store on a decent suit, corsage, and dinner reservations. But when he arrived at her house, flowers in hand, her mother awkwardly explained that Lily had already left, with Jordan. It had been a setup all along, orchestrated to humiliate him one final time before graduation. Anthony drained his whiskey glass and looked out at the city lights. That night had broken something in him, but it had also been a turning point. He had thrown himself into his studies at university, graduating early and with honors, When his prototype for affordable corrective eye technology won the National Innovation Competition, the venture capital offers had poured in. By 25, he had his first million. By 30, his first billion. And now at 38, he had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. He had built schools in developing nations, funded scholarships, and created a foundation that provided free eye care to children worldwide. He had found purpose in his pain, using his success to make sure other kids didn't have to suffer as he had. But he had never confronted his past directly. He had never stood face to face with Jordan and the others as an equal. No, as their superior in every way that actually mattered. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Ray following up on their earlier conversation. Just remember, you're not going for them. You're going for yourself. Anthony stared at the message for a long moment, then made his decision. He opened the reunion email and clicked yes on the RSVP. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of meetings, product launches, and foundation work. Anthony almost forgot about the reunion until Ray placed his travel itinerary on his desk the Monday before the event. Your flight leaves Thursday night. You'll have Friday to settle in before the reunion on Saturday. I've arranged for a car service and reserved your usual suite at your hotel. Ray's emphasis on your made Anthony smile. Even after all these years, it still felt strange to own properties he'd once dreamed of just visiting. Thanks, Ray. I've been thinking about this trip a lot, Anthony admitted. Part of me just wants to roll up in a Lamborghini wearing a custom suit and $1 million watch. Ray raised an eyebrow. That's not your style. You've never been flashy with your wealth? I know. Anthony sighed. And that's not really why I'm going. I guess I just want them to see that their words didn't break me. That I became someone despite their best efforts to convince me I was nothing. Then that's exactly what you'll show them, Ray said confidently, just by being yourself. As the plane touched down in his hometown on Thursday night, Anthony felt a strange mix of emotions. This place had once been his entire world, a world that had often been unkind. Now he returned as a different person, someone who had created his own world far beyond the limited horizons of Westridge. He spent Friday visiting his parents, who still lived in the same modest house where he'd grown up. They were proud of him, but in their typical understated way. They had never cared about his money, only his happiness and character. His mother still fussed over him not eating enough, and his father still called him computer whiz, with the same affectionate tone he'd used when Anthony was building his first PC at 12. That night, alone in his hotel suite, Anthony laid out what he would wear to the reunion. He had decided on something simple but well-made. Dark jeans, a light blue button-up shirt, and a navy blazer. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed money. He wasn't there to show off his wealth. He was there to show that he had become a man worthy of respect on his own terms. As he drifted off to sleep, Anthony wondered what Jordan looked like now, what had become of the high school king who had made life miserable for anyone he deemed unworthy. For the first time in years, Anthony found himself genuinely curious about the people he had once tried so hard to forget. The morning of the reunion arrived with surprising calm. Anthony woke early, went for a run through the town that once felt so big but now seemed quaint and small, then spent the afternoon catching up on work emails. As 6 o'clock approached, he changed into his carefully selected outfit, giving himself a final once-over in the mirror. His reflection showed a confident man, a far cry from the nervous teenager who once avoided mirrors altogether. The Grand Hotel's ballroom had been transformed for the occasion. A banner reading Westridge High School Class of 2005, 20 years later, hung above the entrance. Anthony took a deep breath before walking in, reminding himself why he had come. This wasn't about revenge or showing off. It was about facing his past and finally letting it go. The room was already half full when he arrived. A woman at the check-in table smiled at him blankly, not recognizing him at all. Name? She asked, pen poised over the attendance sheet. Anthony Washington, he replied. Her eyes widened slightly as she found his name on the list. Oh, we weren't sure you'd make it. It's great to have you here. She handed him a name tag and gestured toward the ballroom. Drinks are complimentary for the first hour and dinner will be served at 7. Anthony thanked her and moved into the main space, immediately scanning the room. The years had changed some faces more than others, but he could still recognize most of his former classmates. Some had put on weight, others had lost hair. but the high school social hierarchy seemed eerily preserved in their groupings around the room. He headed for the bar, ordered a club soda, and found a quiet corner where he could observe without being immediately noticed. A few people glanced his way, squinting at his name tag, but no one approached. He wasn't surprised. He had kept to himself in high school, finding refuge in the computer lab during lunch periods and rushing home after classes to avoid confrontations. "Anthony? Anthony Washington, is that you?" He turned to see Mrs. Powell, his former computer science teacher, approaching with a wide smile. She had been one of the few bright spots in his high school experience, the person who had recognized his talent and encouraged him to pursue it. "Mrs. Powell," he said warmly, accepting her hug. "You look exactly the same," she laughed. "You're too kind. And look at you, all grown up and doing such amazing things. I've followed your career, you know. I tell all my current students about you." Anthony felt a genuine smile spread across his face. "That means a lot coming from you. You were the one who believed in me when no one else did." "Nonsense," she said, waving away his words. "I just pointed you in the right direction. You did all the hard work." She lowered her voice. "I must say it's quite something having the reunion here." "Did you know this hotel is owned by Washington Industries?" came a voice from behind them. "One of many properties in their portfolio, though not nearly the most impressive." Anthony turned to find Principal Davis, now retired, but still carrying himself with the same authoritative posture. The man had never been unkind to Anthony, but he had also never intervened during the worst of the bullying, despite knowing it was happening. "Mr. Washington," the former principal said, extending his hand, "I'm pleased you could join us tonight. Your success brings great pride to Westridge." Anthony shook his hand, noting the slight discomfort in the older man's eyes. They both knew the school had done little to nurture that success. In fact, the environment had often been actively hostile toward him. "Thank you, sir," Anthony replied neutrally. "It's interesting to be back." More people began to notice him now, whispering among themselves as recognition dawned. He caught fragments of conversations. "That's him. The tech guy. Billionaire. Vision tech." Mrs. Powell squeezed his arm. "I should mingle with some of the other alumni. Don't disappear before we can catch up properly, okay?" As she walked away, Anthony felt a momentary panic at being left alone. But he was no longer the defenseless teenager afraid of what might happen in the hallway between classes. He was a grown man who had faced down corporate rivals and negotiated billion-dollar deals. He could handle a high school reunion. He made his way around the room, greeting former classmates politely. Some seemed genuinely pleased to see him, while others became awkwardly deferential upon realizing who he was. He chatted with Theo, who had been in the chess club with him, and was now a pediatrician with 3 kids. He reconnected with Dina, who had shared his love of science fiction, and now wrote technical manuals for a software company. It wasn't until he was filling his plate at the buffet that he heard the laugh that used to make him freeze with dread, loud, slightly nasal, and utterly confident. He turned slowly to see Jordan standing near the entrance with Pete and Trent, flanking him like they were still 17 and ruling the school. Jordan had thickened around the middle, his once perfect hair now thinning slightly. He wore an expensive-looking suit that seemed a size too small, straining at the buttons. Pete had maintained his athletic build but had a weathered look about him, while Trent had gone completely bald, compensating with a beard that didn't quite suit his face. Anthony took a deep breath and returned to filling his plate, determined not to let their presence ruin his evening. He had just taken a seat at a table with some former classmates from the Honor Society when he felt a heavy hand clap his shoulder. "Well, well, well," Jordan's voice boomed. "Look who decided to show his face after all these years." Anthony looked up calmly, meeting Jordan's gaze directly, something he would never have done in high school. "Jordan," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Pete, Trent." "Man, I almost didn't recognize you without your mom's hand-me-downs," Pete chimed in, laughing as if he'd said something clever. Anthony took a sip of his water, refusing to be baited. "It's been a long time." "Sure has," Jordan said, pulling up a chair and sitting down without being invited. The others did the same, effectively hijacking the table. Anthony's other table mates looked uncomfortable but didn't leave. "So what are you up to these days, computer boy? Still fixing printers or whatever?" Jordan asked, his tone making it clear he assumed Anthony had achieved little. "I work in technology," Anthony replied simply. "Like IT support?" Trent asked with a smirk. Turning things off and on again all day? A woman at the table, Anthony thought her name was Nicole, cleared her throat. Actually, Anthony is the founder and CEO of Vision Tech. You know, the company that makes those new smart glasses and the affordable eye surgery tech? Jordan's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. No kidding? Good for you, man. I'm doing pretty well myself. Regional sales director at Pinnacle Motors. Got the house, the boat, the whole package. Anthony nodded politely, though he knew that Pinnacle Motors had been struggling for years and had recently announced another round of layoffs. But there was no need to point that out. Remember senior prom? Pete suddenly asked, nudging Jordan with an elbow. When we set him up with Lily. The table went quiet. Even Jordan looked uncomfortable, as if he recognized that some lines shouldn't be crossed. Even now. Yeah, that was a long time ago, Jordan said dismissively, clearly trying to change the subject. But Pete wasn't done. Come on, it was hilarious. He showed up with flowers and everything, and Lily was already gone with Jordan. He turned to Anthony with mock sympathy. No hard feelings, right? Just high school stuff. Anthony set down his fork, surprising himself with how calm he felt. The memory that had once caused him such pain now seemed distant and small. You know what I remember about that night? He said quietly, looking directly at Pete. I remember going home and working on my first real tech prototype instead of wasting money on a limo and after-party drinks. That prototype eventually became the foundation for a company now valued at over $20 billion. He smiled slightly. So actually, I should probably thank you guys. The table fell silent again, but this time with a different energy. The other classmates were looking at Anthony with newfound respect, while Jordan and his friends seemed uncertain how to respond. Jordan was the first to recover, forcing a laugh. Always the smart one, weren't you? I bet you think you're better than all of us now, with your fancy company and your billions. Before Anthony could respond, the reunion coordinator tapped the microphone at the front of the room, calling for everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please find your seats, we're about to begin our evening program. We have some special recognitions to hand out. And then our keynote speaker will share some thoughts about how Westridge shaped their journey. As the room settled, Anthony noticed Jordan and his friends weren't moving from his table. They seemed determined to continue their attempt at intimidation, like sharks circling, waiting for any sign of weakness. But Anthony was no longer prey. He had outgrown their power to hurt him long ago, even if he hadn't fully realized it until this moment. The coordinator began calling up various alumni for recognitions. Traveled the farthest, most children, most career changes, while showing slides from their high school yearbook paired with current photos. The room filled with laughter and applause as classmates made their way to the small stage. Anthony half listened, his mind drifting to the speech he would soon give. He had been asked to be the keynote speaker weeks ago but had kept it private, wanting to observe the reunion dynamics without people treating him differently because of it. Now, as Jordan continued making subtle digs beside him, Anthony wondered how his former bully would react when he took the stage. And now, the coordinator was saying, before we reveal who won most changed and most successful, I'd like to invite our keynote speaker to the stage. This individual has truly exemplified what it means to transform passion into purpose, creating technology that has changed millions of lives while never forgetting their roots. Jordan was in the middle of another story about high school conquest when the coordinator continued. Please welcome to the stage the founder and CEO of Vision Tech and Westridge High School class of 2005 graduate, Anthony Washington. The room erupted in applause as Anthony stood straightening his blazer. He caught the look of complete shock on Jordan's face, followed quickly by disbelief and something that looked remarkably like fear. Excuse me, Anthony said politely to his former bullies. I'm needed elsewhere. As he made his way to the stage, Anthony felt a weight lifting from his shoulders with each step. Whatever happened next, he had already won the only victory that truly mattered, the one against his own past demons. The bright lights of the stage momentarily blinded Anthony as he approached the podium. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, the same eyes that had either looked away when he was being tormented or, worse, watched with amusement. But tonight, those eyes held something new: respect, curiosity, even admiration. Anthony adjusted the microphone and looked out across the sea of faces, easily finding Jordan and his friends. They sat rigid in their chairs, expressions frozen in disbelief. Jordan's face had turned an interesting shade of red, while Pete kept opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. Trent simply stared, his earlier smugness completely evaporated. "Good evening, everyone," Anthony began, his voice steady and confident. "It feels strange to be standing up here. If you had told 17-year-old me that someday I'd be addressing a room full of my classmates as a keynote speaker, I probably would have hidden in the computer lab even longer than I already did." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Some people nodded, remembering the quiet boy who always had his head buried in lines of code. "High school is a formative time for all of us," Anthony continued. "For better or worse, the experiences we have during those years help shape who we become. Westridge gave me many things, excellent teachers like Mrs. Powell, who saw potential in me that I couldn't see in myself, and rigorous academic challenges that prepared me for university." He paused, considering his next words carefully. He had rehearsed this speech many times, but now, faced with the actual moment, he found himself wanting to speak more directly from the heart. "Westridge also taught me some harder lessons. I learned what it feels like to be an outsider. I learned that people can be cruel for no reason other than the fact that you're different. I learned that some days, just making it to the final bell without incident feels like a victory." The room had gone completely silent. Many people looked down at their hands or exchanged uncomfortable glances. They all knew what he was talking about. They had all witnessed it, participated in it, or experienced it themselves. But here's what I want to share with you tonight. Those difficult experiences were just as valuable as the good ones. They built resilience I didn't know I had. They forced me to find strength within myself, rather than seeking validation from others. And most importantly, they gave me a deep empathy for people who feel excluded or marginalized. Anthony took a sip of water, noticing that even Jordan was listening intently now, his earlier bravado completely gone. "When I founded Vision Tech, I wanted to do more than just create another tech company. I wanted to use technology to solve real problems for people who are often overlooked. Our most successful product line isn't the one that makes luxury smart glasses for the wealthy. It's the one that provides affordable corrective eye procedures for children in developing countries. Last year alone, over 2 million children received the gift of clear vision because of technology we developed." He clicked a button, and the screen behind him displayed photos of smiling children wearing simple glasses, surrounded by Vision Tech medical staff. "These kids remind me of myself in many ways. They were born into circumstances they didn't choose. They faced obstacles that weren't their fault. But with just a little help, just someone believing in them and giving them the tools they need, they can go on to do amazing things." Anthony noticed several people wiping away tears, including Mrs. Powell. Even Principal Davis looked moved. The truth is, success isn't about proving people wrong, although I won't deny there's some satisfaction in that. This earned him another gentle laugh from the audience. "Real success is about living a life aligned with your values and making a positive difference in the world. By that measure, I'm proud of what I've accomplished. Not because of the money or the recognition, but because of the impact." Anthony paused again, his gaze sweeping across the room before landing on Jordan. "I want to announce something special tonight. Vision Tech is establishing a scholarship fund at Westridge High School. Starting next year, 5 students who demonstrate exceptional promise in STEM fields but face significant personal or financial challenges will receive full scholarships to the colleges of their choice, along with mentoring from our company's top engineers and scientists." The room burst into applause. Principal Davis was beaming, already calculating how this would reflect on the school. "Additionally," Anthony continued when the noise died down, "we're donating $5 million to completely renovate the school's science and computer labs, creating a state-of-the-art learning environment that will give future students opportunities I could only dream of when I sat in those classrooms." This announcement brought people to their feet, the applause even louder than before. Anthony noticed that Jordan and his friends remained seated, looking increasingly uncomfortable as the celebration continued around them. "I'm calling it the Second Chance Initiative," Anthony said when he could be heard again, "because everyone deserves a second chance to rewrite their story. That includes the kids who feel invisible, the ones who are bullied, and yes, even the ones doing the bullying. We all have the capacity to grow and change, to become better versions of ourselves." He made eye contact with Jordan as he said this last part, not with malice but with genuine conviction. Jordan quickly looked away. Thank you for listening, and thank you to the reunion committee for inviting me to speak tonight. I hope the next 20 years bring all of you fulfillment, purpose, and the joy that comes from making a positive difference in someone else's life. With that, Anthony stepped away from the podium and the room once again erupted in applause. As he made his way off the stage, people reached out to pat him on the back or shake his hand. Mrs. Powell caught him in another hug, tears streaming down her face. "I always knew you were special," she whispered. "I just had no idea how much you would accomplish." Anthony thanked her and continued moving through the crowd, accepting congratulations and reconnecting with classmates who now seemed eager to claim some association with him. It was ironic, he thought, how quickly people could revise their memories of the past. He was in the middle of a conversation with his former chemistry lab partner when he felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he found himself face to face with Lily Chen, the girl from the prom setup. She looked elegant in a simple black dress, her hair styled in loose waves around her shoulders. Unlike many in the room, she showed no signs of discomfort meeting his gaze. "Anthony," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "I've been hoping to speak with you." "Lily," he replied, surprised by how little emotion her presence stirred in him. The pain of that night had faded to almost nothing. "It's been a long time," she nodded. "I've been following your work with Vision Tech. It's truly remarkable what you've accomplished." "Thank you. But that's not why I wanted to talk to you," she continued. "I've wanted to apologize to you for years, but I never knew how to reach out. What happened at prom, I wasn't in on their plan initially. Jordan asked me to go with him and I was flattered. Then later, when I found out what they had done to you..." She trailed off, clearly struggling with the memory. "I was a coward," she said finally. "I should have stood up to them. I should have warned you. Instead, I went along with it because I was afraid of becoming their next target. I've regretted it ever since." Anthony studied her face, seeing genuine remorse in her eyes. "That was a long time ago, Lily. We were all just kids trying to navigate a difficult time." "That doesn't excuse it," she insisted. "After I saw you on the cover of Tech Innovators magazine a few years back, I almost wrote to your company. But it felt self-serving, like I was only reaching out because you had become successful." Anthony smiled slightly. "Well, I appreciate you saying something now. It means a lot." "I teach high school science now," Lily said, returning his smile. "I make a point of protecting the quiet, smart kids from the Jordans of the world. It's my way of making amends, I guess." Before Anthony could respond, they were interrupted by a commotion near the bar. Jordan stood there, clearly intoxicated, his voice rising above the background music and conversation. "So Washington thinks he's better than everyone now," Jordan was saying loudly to anyone who would listen. "Sure, he's got money, but does he have friends? Does he have a family? I bet he's just a lonely rich guy trying to buy people's respect." People were backing away from Jordan, embarrassed by his outburst. Pete looked like he wanted to disappear while Trent was trying unsuccessfully to calm his friend down. "Should we get security?" Lily asked quietly. Anthony shook his head. "No, that would only make it worse. Besides, he's just embarrassing himself." As if on cue, Jordan spotted Anthony and Lily talking, his face contorted with anger as he pointed in their direction. "There he is, the great Anthony Washington. Tell us, genius, did all that money make up for being a total loser in high school? Did it fix that chip on your shoulder?" The room went silent again as Jordan staggered forward, pushing past people to get closer to Anthony. Security guards positioned near the doors began moving toward the disturbance, but Anthony raised a hand slightly, signaling them to wait. "You think you're so much better than me?" Jordan continued, his words slurring slightly. "But I knew you when you were nothing. When you wore the same 3 shirts all year. When you ate lunch alone because nobody wanted to sit with you." Anthony remained calm, his expression neutral as Jordan approached. They were now standing just a few feet apart, the entire room watching the confrontation with collective held breath. "Jordan," Anthony said evenly, "I think you've had enough to drink. Why don't we get you some water and..." "Don't patronize me," Jordan spat. "You might have fooled everyone else with your rags to riches story and your charitable donations, but I know the real you. The weak, pathetic kid who couldn't stand up for himself." Something shifted in Anthony's expression then, not anger but a deep, settled certainty. He took a step closer to Jordan, lowering his voice so that only those nearby could hear. "You're right about one thing, Jordan. You did know me when I had nothing. You saw me at my lowest, most vulnerable time. And how did you respond? With cruelty, with mockery. You used your popularity and strength to make someone else feel small. That says a lot more about you than it ever did about me. Jordan's face flushed darker, but Anthony continued before he could interrupt. The difference between us isn't money or success. It's that I learned from those painful years. They taught me compassion and humility. What did they teach you, Jordan? Looking at you now, I have to wonder if you've learned anything at all. The words landed like physical blows. Jordan seemed to deflate before everyone's eyes, the bravado draining away to reveal something much more fragile underneath. For a moment, Anthony thought he saw the flash of a scared little boy behind the mask of the aging bully, someone whose peak had come and gone in high school, leaving nothing but faded glory and growing bitterness. You don't know anything about my life, Jordan said, but the fight had gone out of his voice. You're right, I don't, Anthony agreed, and you don't know about mine beyond what you've assumed. Maybe that's the real lesson here, that we never really know someone else's story. We're all fighting battles others can't see. Jordan stood swaying slightly, trapped between anger and shame with nowhere left to go. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Pete finally stepped forward, taking Jordan's arm. Come on, man. Let's get some air, Pete said, gently guiding his friend away from the confrontation. As they moved toward the exit, Anthony noticed something he hadn't expected, a look of relief on Pete's face, almost gratitude, as if Anthony had somehow done them all a favor by not escalating the situation. The tension in the room gradually dispersed as conversations resumed. People gave Anthony respectful space, sensing that he might need a moment after the confrontation. Lily had melted back into the crowd, leaving Anthony standing alone near the center of the ballroom, feeling strangely light. What had just happened was the showdown he had both dreaded and secretly anticipated for 20 years. But instead of feeling triumphant or vindicated, Anthony felt something closer to pity for his former tormentor. Jordan was still trapped in high school glory, while Anthony had moved on to build something meaningful. As he walked toward the bar to get a fresh drink, Anthony realized that the real victory wasn't in confronting Jordan or showing off his success. It was in the simple fact that those painful memories no longer had power over him. He had truly finally let them go. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, photographs, and reconnections. Anthony found himself genuinely enjoying the company of former classmates who approached him with respect and curiosity, rather than the fear or indifference they had shown in high school. He shared stories about his global travels, listened to their life journeys, and exchanged contact information with people he now wanted to keep in touch with. Around midnight, as the event was winding down, Anthony stepped outside for some fresh air. The September night was cool but comfortable, stars visible above despite the city lights. He leaned against the stone balustrade of the hotel's terrace, taking a moment to process everything that had happened. Mind if I join you? Anthony turned to find Trent standing nearby, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain. Of Jordan's three-man crew, Trent had always been the quietest, often seeming to go along with the bullying more out of loyalty to his friends than actual malice. Free country, Anthony replied neutrally. Turning back to look at the stars, Trent moved to stand a few feet away, also gazing upward. Jordan's gone. Pete took him home. He'll probably not remember much of this tomorrow. That's probably for the best, Anthony said. They stood in silence for a long moment before Trent spoke again. I never actually hated you, back then. Anthony glanced at him sideways. Could have fooled me. Trent sighed heavily. Yeah, I know. I was a follower. Jordan and Pete were my tickets to popularity, and I didn't have the guts to stand up to them. It's not an excuse, just the truth. Why are you telling me this now? Anthony asked. Because I have a son, Trent said quietly. He's 14. Smart kid, loves computers and science stuff. Not very athletic, kind of awkward socially. He paused. Last month I found out he was being bullied at school. Same kind of stuff we did to you. Anthony turned to face him fully now, seeing the pain in the other man's expression. It hit me all at once, Trent continued. What we must have put you through, what I helped do to you, I've been trying to help my boy. Telling him it gets better, that the bullies peak in high school while the smart kids go on to do amazing things. He gave a bitter laugh. I've basically been using you as an example without even realizing it. And then tonight, seeing you up there successful beyond what any of us could have imagined. Your son will be okay, Anthony said after a moment. He has something I didn't. A father who understands and supports him. Trent's eyes looked suspiciously damp in the dim light. I hope so. I'm trying to be better than my old man was. He hesitated, then extended his hand. For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry for how I treated you. You deserved better. Anthony looked at the offered hand, thinking about how simple gestures can sometimes mean the most. He took Trent's hand and shook it firmly. Thank you for saying that. It matters. Would you? Trent seemed to struggle with his next words. Would you be willing to talk to my son sometime? Not about the bullying or the past, just about your work. He idolizes tech innovators like you, and hearing from someone who made it through the same stuff he's dealing with. It might really help him. The request surprised Anthony, but he found himself nodding. Send me his information through the reunion page. I'll set up a video call with him. Trent's relief was palpable. Thank you. Seriously. As Trent walked away, Anthony turned back to the view, reflecting on how differently the night had unfolded from what he had anticipated. He had come expecting to confront his past and perhaps enjoy some small revenge through his success. Instead, he had found something more valuable, a chance to break cycles of pain and perhaps help someone else through their own difficult time. The terrace door opened again, and this time Mrs. Powell joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the night air. There you are, she said warmly. I was hoping to catch you before you left. That was quite a moment with Jordan earlier. Anthony smiled. Not exactly how I pictured my triumphant return. No, she agreed, it was better. You showed real grace, Anthony. The kind that comes from genuine strength, not just success. I had good teachers, he replied, giving her a meaningful look. One tries, she said modestly. You know, I kept all the articles about you over the years. Whenever a student seems ready to give up because things are hard, I tell them about my former student who revolutionized affordable eye care, technology, and became a billionaire before 40. I hope you also mention I was a terrible lab partner who once nearly set fire to the computer lab. Anthony joked. Mrs. Powell laughed. Only sometimes. It helps humanize you. She grew more serious. Your donation to the school is incredibly generous. It will change so many young lives. That's the idea, Anthony said. The labs were outdated even when I was a student. I can't imagine how ancient they must be now. Ancient doesn't begin to cover it, she confirmed. We're still using some of the same equipment you used. The school board keeps cutting the budget for non-essential subjects. Anthony shook his head. Well, that ends now. I want the next generation of students to have every opportunity I didn't. And not just the ones who are already thriving, especially the ones who are struggling, who don't fit in, who need someone to believe in them. Like you did, Mrs. Powell said softly. Like I did, he agreed, and like you did for me. They stood in comfortable silence, teacher and former student now equals in a way that would have seemed impossible 20 years ago. What's next for Vision Tech? Mrs. Powell finally asked. Any exciting new projects on the horizon? Anthony smiled, feeling the familiar enthusiasm that always came when discussing his work. Actually, yes. We're developing a neural interface that could help restore vision for people with certain types of blindness. Early testing has been promising, but we're still years away from widespread application. That's extraordinary, she said, genuine awe in her voice. You're literally giving people the gift of sight. That's the goal, Anthony replied. Vision is so fundamental to how most people experience the world. When someone can't see clearly or at all, it affects everything from education to employment opportunities to basic independence. Our technology won't solve every problem, but it can level the playing field a bit. Mrs. Powell studied his face in the moonlight. You know, some people in your position would have used their success very differently. They might have focused on luxury products for the wealthy, or isolated themselves in some private paradise. Anthony thought about this. I suppose that path was always available, but it never really tempted me. Maybe because I know what it feels like to be overlooked, to have potential that others can't or won't see. Once you've experienced that, it's hard to ignore others in similar situations. That's what makes you exceptional, Anthony. Not the money or the success, your heart. She patted his arm. I should get back inside. My husband will be wondering where I've disappeared to. Will you be in town long? Just until tomorrow afternoon. Anthony said. I have meetings back in the city on Monday. Well, don't be a stranger. And remember, you've always got a place to visit at Westridge. I expect you to come speak to my advanced computing classes when the new lab is ready. It would be my honor, Anthony said sincerely, as Mrs. Powell returned inside. Anthony checked his watch, surprised to see it was nearly 1 a.m. The reunion was officially over, though some attendees were still mingling in the ballroom or had moved to the hotel bar to continue catching up. He decided it was time to head up to his suite. The emotional weight of the evening had left him drained but satisfied, like after completing a challenging project. As he crossed the lobby toward the elevators, he heard his name called once more. Mr. Washington, a moment, please. Principal Davis was hurrying toward him, slightly out of breath. The older man had clearly been looking for him. Mr. Washington, I just wanted to express my personal gratitude for your generous contribution to Westridge, he said, extending his hand. It's truly transformative for our school. Anthony shook his hand. I'm happy to give back. Principal Davis hesitated, clearly having more to say. I also wanted to apologize. Apologize? Anthony raised an eyebrow. Yes, for not doing more when you were a student. The former principal looked genuinely uncomfortable now. I was aware of some of the difficulties you faced. The bullying from Jordan and others. I should have intervened more forcefully. Anthony hadn't expected this conversation, particularly not at 1 a.m. in a hotel lobby. You had hundreds of students to look after, he said diplomatically. That's no excuse, Davis insisted. Educators have a responsibility to create a safe environment for every student, not just the popular ones or the troublemakers who demand attention. Watching you tonight, seeing the man you've become despite those challenges, made me realize how many students like you I might have failed over the years. Anthony could see the genuine regret in the older man's eyes. It was an uncomfortable reminder that the adults who should have protected him had often looked the other way, prioritizing convenience over justice. The past is the past, Anthony said carefully. What matters now is making sure current and future students have better experiences. That's why I'm funding the new facilities and scholarships. Of course, Davis agreed quickly. And I've offered to chair the scholarship committee, if that meets with your approval. I may be retired, but I still know how to spot potential in young people. Anthony considered this. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man who had failed to protect him now wanted to help decide which students deserved his money. But people could change, couldn't they? Wasn't that what he believed when he spoke to Trent? I think that would be fine, Principal Davis, Anthony said. Just remember to look beyond the obvious candidates. Sometimes the students with the most potential aren't the ones with perfect grades or spotless disciplinary records. Sometimes they're the quiet ones in the back of the classroom just trying to survive until graduation. Davis nodded solemnly. I understand. And please call me Robert. I think we're well past the principal-student relationship. Robert, then. Good night. Anthony finally made it to the elevator and up to his suite. As he loosened his tie and kicked off his shoes, he looked out the window at the town where he had grown up, the place that had both wounded him and shaped him. He took out his phone and sent a quick text to Ray. Mission accomplished. Heading home tomorrow. Full debrief Monday. Ray's response came almost immediately, despite the late hour. Proud of you, boss. Can't wait to hear all about it. Anthony smiled, grateful for the steadfast friend and colleague who had been by his side through so much of his journey. He was about to set his phone down when it buzzed again with another message. This one was from his brother. How'd it go? Did you show those jerks who's boss? Anthony considered how to respond. Did he show them who was boss? Not in the way his brother probably imagined, with flashy displays of wealth or cutting remarks. Instead, he had shown them something more powerful, that their cruelty had failed to define or limit him, that he had built a life of meaning and purpose that transcended their petty high school kingdom. Better than I expected, Anthony typed back. I'll call you tomorrow and tell you everything. As he prepared for bed, Anthony reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. From the scared, lonely teenager to the confident businessman, from the victim of bullying to the creator of technology that helped millions, from someone seeking validation to someone secure enough in his own worth to offer others a second chance. The Anthony who had dreaded this reunion just weeks ago seemed like a different person now. That Anthony had still been carrying the weight of old wounds, still seeking some form of closure or vindication. But somewhere between Jordan's taunts and Trent's apology, between his speech and his quiet conversation with Mrs. Powell, something had shifted. He no longer needed the approval of people who had once made him feel small. He no longer needed to prove his worth through displays of wealth or success. He had found something more valuable, the power to transform pain into purpose, to use his past not as a burden but as a bridge to help others. As he drifted toward sleep, Anthony Washington felt truly free for perhaps the first time in his adult life, not because he had confronted his bullies or shown off his success, but because he had finally completely let go of the need to do either. The scared boy from Westridge High would always be part of him, but he was no longer defined by that chapter of his story. Tomorrow, he would return to his life in the city, to board meetings and product launches, to the foundation work he found so fulfilling. But he would carry with him the unexpected gifts of this reunion: reconciliation, release, and the quiet certainty that he had not just survived his past, but had transformed it into something beautiful. 6 months after the reunion, Anthony sat in his office reviewing the quarterly reports for the Vision Tech Foundation. Spring sunshine streamed through the windows, casting warm patches of light across his desk. The foundation had grown significantly in the past few months, partly due to the publicity generated by his donations to Westridge High School. The first scholarship recipients have been selected, Ray announced, entering with a tablet in hand. The committee just sent over the final list for your approval. Anthony took the tablet, scrolling through the 5 names and accompanying files. Principal Davis, Robert, had kept his word about looking beyond the obvious candidates. Among the selections were a girl who had overcome homelessness to maintain top grades in science classes, a boy with partial hearing loss who had developed an innovative sound amplification app, and 3 other students with compelling stories and remarkable potential. These look excellent, Anthony said, handing the tablet back to Ray. Make sure they each receive welcome packages along with the official notifications, and set up video calls so I can personally congratulate them. Already in your calendar for next week, Ray confirmed. Also, construction on the new science and computer labs is ahead of schedule. The school board is suggesting a ribbon-cutting ceremony in August before the new academic year begins. Anthony nodded. Book it, I want to be there in person. As Ray turned to leave, Anthony called after him. Any word from Trent about his son? Ray paused at the door. Yes, actually. The boy sent an email this morning, thanking you for the mentorship sessions. Said he's joined the robotics club at school and is entering a regional competition next month. Anthony smiled. After his conversation with Trent on the terrace, he had not only arranged a video call with the boy, but had also connected him with Vision Tech's youth outreach program, which paired promising young tech enthusiasts with mentors from the company. The boy, Liam, showed remarkable aptitude for robotics and had blossomed under the guidance of one of Anthony's senior engineers. Send him a robotics kit from the development lab, Anthony said. The prototype one we were testing for the education division, and tell him I expect an invitation to the competition. Will do, Ray replied with a knowing smile. After Ray left, Anthony swiveled his chair to look out at the city skyline. His life had continued much as before after the reunion. Busy days filled with meetings, product development sessions, and foundation work. But something fundamental had shifted within him. The closure he had found that night had freed up. Emotional energy he hadn't realized was still being consumed by old wounds. His phone buzzed, with a message from Lily Chen. They had reconnected properly in the month since the reunion, developing a friendship based on their shared interest in educational technology. Lily had become an advisor for the Westridge Scholarship Program, helping to identify promising students who might otherwise be overlooked. Just interviewed an amazing prospect for next year's scholarship cohort, her message read. Reminds me of you, brilliant but flying under the radar. Can I send you her project proposal? Absolutely, Anthony texted back. Looking forward to it. He set down his phone, reflecting on how unexpectedly life had evolved. The reunion he had dreaded had become a catalyst for positive change, not just for him but for others as well. The Second Chance initiative had expanded beyond Westridge to include 3 other schools in disadvantaged neighborhoods, with plans to go nationwide within 5 years. A knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. It was Diane from PR holding a magazine. Hot off the presses, she said, placing it on his desk. They did a great job with the cover story. Anthony looked down at the latest issue of Impact magazine. His own face looked back at him beneath the headline, Vision for Change, How Anthony Washington is Revolutionizing STEM Education for Underserved Youth. They've been calling all morning asking if you've seen it, Diane continued. They're especially interested in your reaction to the sidebar about the anti-bullying programs. Anthony flipped to the article, skimming the sidebar that detailed how the Second Chance Initiative was incorporating anti-bullying education alongside its STEM programs. It quoted several education experts praising the holistic approach. Tell them I'm pleased with the coverage, Anthony said, and follow up about getting more visibility for the student projects we discussed. After Diane left, Anthony continued reading the article more carefully. The writer had done a thorough job researching his background, including some details about his challenging high school years. There was even a quote from Mrs. Powell about his transformation from shy student to technology leader. Near the end of the piece was a photo of Anthony with the Westridge High principal and several students, taken during his visit to discuss the new facilities. The caption noted that the school had recently implemented a peer mentorship program, where older students helped younger ones navigate the social and academic challenges of high school. Anthony closed the magazine, feeling a sense of satisfaction that went beyond professional pride. This was the kind of impact he had always hoped to have, creating ripple effects that extended far beyond himself or his company. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Washington, your 2-hour appointment is here. Send him in, Anthony replied, standing to greet his visitor. The door opened to reveal a man Anthony hadn't seen since the night of the reunion. Jordan stood awkwardly in the doorway, dressed in a suit that fit him better than the one he'd worn 6 months ago. He looked nervous but sober, a far cry from the belligerent figure who had confronted Anthony that night. Jordan, Anthony said neutrally, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Please have a seat. Jordan entered cautiously as if expecting to be turned away at any moment. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, he said, his voice lacking the confidence it had once carried. I know you're busy. I always make time for important meetings, Anthony replied, sitting down. Your message said you wanted to discuss a business proposal. After the reunion, Anthony had not expected to hear from Jordan again. The email requesting a meeting had come as a surprise, especially since it mentioned a business matter rather than any reference to their past. Jordan nodded, placing a slim folder on the desk. Yes, I've been doing a lot of thinking since the reunion. A lot has changed for me. Oh? Anthony kept his expression neutral, curious where this was heading. I lost my job at Pinnacle, Jordan admitted. Part of the mass layoffs they announced right after the reunion. After 20 years with the company, I was suddenly unemployed at 48. It was humbling. Anthony said nothing, simply nodding for Jordan to continue. The thing is, Jordan went on, it forced me to reevaluate everything. My career, my choices, the kind of person I've been. He met Anthony's gaze directly for the first time, including how I treated people in the past. How I treated you. Anthony hadn't expected this turn in the conversation. I thought this was about business. It is, Jordan assured him quickly. But I couldn't walk in here pretending the past doesn't exist. What I did to you in high school. The things I said at the reunion. I was wrong. Completely wrong. And I'm truly sorry. The apology hung in the air between them. Anthony studied the man across from him, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation. But all he saw was someone who appeared genuinely remorseful, and perhaps a bit broken by recent events. Apology accepted, Anthony said simply. Relief washed over Jordan's face. Thank you, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I appreciate it more than you know. Everyone deserves a second chance, Jordan. That's something I've come to believe strongly. Anthony gestured to the folder. Now tell me about this proposal. Jordan seemed to regain some confidence as he opened the folder. After losing my job, I had to figure out what to do next. Sales was all I knew. But the market for middle-aged sales directors isn't great these days. He pulled out several documents with graphs and projections. Then I remembered something from our conversation at the reunion. Your company's work providing eye care technology to developing countries. Anthony raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. My severance package included health benefits that covered LASIK surgery, something I'd been putting off for years, Jordan continued. After getting the procedure and experiencing the difference it made in my life, I started researching vision care access more broadly. He handed Anthony a detailed proposal. I've spent the last 5 months developing a distribution network concept that could help get Vision Tech's affordable eye care products to rural areas in the U.S., where access is limited. Places like Appalachia, remote parts of the Southwest, tribal lands. I've made connections with regional healthcare providers and mapped out a sustainable business model. Anthony skimmed the proposal, genuinely impressed by the thoroughness and innovation it displayed. This was not what he had expected from Jordan, not at all. You've put a lot of work into this, Anthony acknowledged. The distribution challenges for rural communities are something we've been trying to solve for a while now. Jordan nodded eagerly. I know the sales side inside and out. That's my strength. Combined with your technology and existing infrastructure, I believe we could reach thousands of people who are currently underserved. Anthony set down the proposal. Why bring this to me directly? You could have submitted it through normal channels. Jordan's confidence faltered slightly. Would it have been considered coming from me? After how I behaved at the reunion, I figured my name would get the proposal tossed immediately. It was a fair point. Anthony would likely have been skeptical of anything with Jordan's name attached if it had come through regular channels. Besides, Jordan added more quietly, I wanted to apologize in person. No matter what happens with the proposal. Anthony leaned back in his chair, considering the man before him. Was this a genuine transformation? Or just someone desperate for a job who had calculated that contrition was his best angle? The proposal itself was solid, that much was clear. And Vision Tech could certainly benefit from Jordan's sales expertise and the distribution network he had begun developing. I'm not going to make any decisions today, Anthony said finally. I'll need to review this more thoroughly and discuss it with my team. But I'm interested enough to continue the conversation. Jordan's relief was palpable. That's all I'm asking for. A fair chance. That's something everyone deserves, Anthony said. He stood, signaling the end of their meeting. I'll have Ray, my assistant, contact you next week to schedule a follow-up discussion with our distribution team. Jordan stood as well, extending his hand. Thank you, Anthony. Truly. As they shook hands, Anthony realized how completely the power dynamic between them had reversed. The boy who had once cowered from Jordan's taunts was now the man deciding Jordan's professionalism. Fate. It would be easy, so easy to enjoy that reversal, to perhaps string Jordan along before ultimately rejecting his proposal. A small human part of Anthony even craved that satisfaction, but that wasn't the person he had become. That wasn't the legacy he wanted to create. One thing, Jordan, Anthony said as they walked to the door. If we move forward with this, you should know that all of our partnerships include a community service component. In this case, I'd want you personally involved in our anti-bullying initiatives in schools. Your perspective as someone who has seen both sides could be valuable. Jordan looked startled, then thoughtful. I'd be willing to do that. More than willing, actually. I have a nephew who's been having trouble with bullies at his school. It hits different when it's someone you care about on the receiving end. Anthony nodded. It often takes seeing the impact on someone close to us to really understand. He opened the door. We'll be in touch next week. After Jordan left, Anthony returned to his desk and read through the proposal more carefully. It was genuinely innovative, combining Jordan's sales expertise with a nuanced understanding of healthcare distribution challenges. If it worked, it could extend Vision Tech's reach to communities they had struggled to serve effectively. His phone buzzed with a text from Ray. How did it go with Jordan? Should I call security for the next visit? Anthony smiled and texted back. Actually, schedule a meeting with the distribution team for next week and add him to the list of potential speakers for the anti-bullying summit in July. Ray's response came quickly. Seriously? What happened in there? I'll explain later, Anthony replied. Let's just say people can surprise you. He set down his phone and turned his chair to face the window again. The city stretched before him, bustling with people going about their lives, each carrying their own stories of triumph and failure, pain and redemption. 20 years ago, if someone had told the teenage Anthony that he would someday be considering a business partnership with Jordan, he would have thought they were crazy. But life had a way of writing stories too complex and surprising for anyone to predict. His computer chimed with a calendar reminder. Virtual mentoring session with Liam, 3 p.m. Anthony smiled, turning back to his desk. The past would always be part of his story, but it was the present and the future he was helping to shape that truly mattered now. That evening, Anthony stepped into the elevator of his apartment building, loosening his tie after a long but productive day. As the doors were about to close, a hand reached in and a woman stepped inside. "Going up?" she asked with a warm smile. "Yes, penthouse," Anthony replied, recognizing her as the new resident who had moved in a few floors below him last month. They had exchanged pleasantries in passing but never really talked. "I'm Alexandra, by the way," she said, extending her hand. "I've been meaning to introduce myself properly." "Anthony," he replied, shaking her hand. "Nice to finally meet you. I just picked up your story in Impact magazine," she mentioned. "The work you're doing with STEM education for underserved communities is remarkable." "Thank you," Anthony said, genuinely pleased. "Do you work in education?" "Healthcare policy, actually," she replied. "But educational access and healthcare access often go hand in hand in the communities I work with." The elevator stopped at her floor, and as she stepped out, she turned back to him. "I'm hosting a small dinner next weekend for some colleagues working on rural healthcare initiatives. You might find it interesting if you're free." Anthony found himself nodding. "I'd like that. My assistant can coordinate details if that works for you." "Perfect," she said with a smile as the doors began to close. "Looking forward to it, Anthony." As the elevator continued upward, Anthony felt a quiet contentment settle over him. His life had taken another unexpected turn today, with Jordan's visit and now this impromptu invitation. Neither would have been possible without the journey that began at the reunion 6 months ago. The teenage Anthony, lonely and bullied, could never have imagined the man he would become, or the impact he would have. The wounds that once defined him had healed into something stronger, not scars, but foundations for building a better world for others. When he reached his apartment, Anthony walked straight to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. As darkness fell, lights twinkled on across the skyline, each one representing lives being lived, stories unfolding, possibilities waiting to be discovered. He had once measured success by the distance he could put between himself and his painful past. Now he understood that true success meant using that past to build bridges for others, creating connections rather than divisions, offering second chances rather than seeking revenge. Anthony Washington, once the bullied boy from Westridge High, now stood as a man defined not by what had been done to him, but by what he chose to do for others. And in that choice, he had found not just success, but something far more valuable. He had found purpose. The $100 million that had so shocked his former bullies? It was just a number, a tool for creating change. The real wealth was in the lives he touched, the potential he unlocked, and the cycles of pain he helped to break. As night settled fully over the city, Anthony turned away from the window and toward his future. A future brighter and more meaningful than he could have ever imagined during those difficult high school days. A future built not in spite of his past, but because of it, and he wouldn't have had it any other way.